Hello and welcome to this episode of Sexier Than a Squirrel, the podcast where we show you how to beat environmental distractions, how to become stronger than the squirrel, the half-eaten hamburger, and even the melted ice cream.
And today we are talking big dog versus small dog. And for us, it's something we know all too well. We've worked with clients over, well, the whole world, right? With big dogs, with small dogs, and extremes, right? We have Chihuahuas through to, I don't know, a dog de Bordeaux. Yeah,
huge differences. Now, first of all, to open this off, this is almost something to be celebrated, and it's like crazy to think about that. Can you think of any other species on the planet where there is that much variety between individuals, right? So you even think about cats, and sure, you can get like short-haired cats, long-haired cats, bald cats, but there isn't that much variety.
I mean, you don't get like cats like the
miniature cats
big,
and then
cats.
Like,
I mean, you do get like Maine Coons, I suppose, but it's not the same extreme. Not the extreme. Great Dane and Chihuahua.
You can get a 1.5 kilo Chihuahua and an 80 kilo Great Dane. Like that, there is no other species on this planet where there is so much variety.
You would never put them as like the same thing, right? Like, and yet how much should we celebrate them? Because that is so worth celebrating.
If you were an alien that just landed on this planet and you had the job of characterizing the species of the planet, Chihuahuas would be their own species. Maybe they should be. I don't know.
I think little Pixel who trains with us should be. She is definitely
so sweet.
She is the cutest dog. She's the cutest dog alive.
Yeah. So before we crack on with that and we kind of jump into that, couple of things. Make sure you have subscribed to the podcast. If you have not already, you need to do so, and then you get notified when we put new podcasts out. Obviously it's a weekly podcast, but we do like to also just do the odd surprise. So if you're subscribed, then what happens is you get a little notification that it's gone live. Now, the way that you do that, you can go to absolutedogs.me/start, and you'll be able to follow the steps there, and you also get your free download where we effectively get you up to speed in the Absolute Dogs Game Changer world as well. So, big dogs, small dogs. Question that we get asked all the time. Now's our opportunity to talk about it. Where do we start?
So for me, number one, Tom and I, we train all dogs. Mm-hmm. So we absolutely are passionate about dogs, and both of us have small dogs. Yep. And I don't think we have like maybe some of the giant dogs. But we're definitely celebratory of them. Yeah. And obviously we have dogs that
many students
we are passionate about. And at the same time, many of our students have their own breeds as well. So for me, number one, we love all dogs. And number two, actually, we believe that all of these dogs are very, very trainable. Absolutely. In their own way. Maybe it might be more niche, more bespoke, slight variations of how we might do a game or adapt a game. If you haven't worked with us before, we're hugely adaptable, flexible, very resourceful, very optimistic. For example, I don't know, I wouldn't be playing, maybe one of our games is called Thunder. You might have seen it through Leash Off Game On. And with Thunder, I might not play that with the Great Dane. Mm-hmm. It might not work. Might not go well. And yet playing, I don't know, Thunder with Little Thistle, Tom's miniature Dachshund would work beautifully. So for us, we might adapt things, but actually we believe all dogs are absolutely trainable through the power of great reinforcement.
Absolutely. So there are a few key things that we see as being differences. And the first one is probably the most important, and that is that a small dog, their daily food allowance is much, much less.
And when we say their daily food allowance, we ditch the bowl.
Yeah.
And that's something that you'll experience when you get your download of all of the things that we do. It's a free download. You should already have it. However, if you haven't, we ditch the bowl. We use all of our dog's daily allowance. And when we use our daily allowance of, say, Thistle versus Tom has a standard poodle, Illy, if we were using it with those two, those are probably our most extreme.
There'd be a big difference in terms of the amount. So, for example, Little Thistle, she'd have a relatively small pot of value. And with Illy, she would have quite a big pot of value, and yet they probably both have similar opportunity to reward great choices throughout the day. So I think the first thing with small dogs, and we say this to our students, that especially that have the tiny dogs, and we do this with our own dogs as well, you have to prioritize. You have to pick your battles, and you have to say, okay, I'm going to say focus on proximity and optimism right now, because that is what I need to focus on. So my pot of value is going to go towards that, right?
And I think I'm thinking pick Pixel with lovely Kathy. She's one of our game changers. She's definitely #IamSexy type. She is 100% game changer. You watch how she does her food, as in how she preps it. So it's tiny, tiny, tiny pieces, many of them.
Yeah.
And you also look at how she prioritizes how she's going to use it. So she's a great example of a Chihuahua and a Chihuahua's owner and how they might do it.
Yeah. And the thing that you've got to think is that actually there are probably loads of things that you want to work on. But because you've only got so much value in the day, small amount, you've got to prioritize what is going to be important for you right now. So that's what we mean by pick your battles. Whereas with a larger dog, you actually have more opportunity to reward lots of different things because you've got more pot of value. There are other kind of pros and cons to larger dogs that we'll speak about in a second. So that's the first thing. Second thing that Lauren mentioned is the prep. So if you've got a small dog, and you're probably going to want to think about the type of food that you feed. So,
I mean, even some of my owners who come to classes, Tom and I live here in Devon. It's the most amazing place, and we do have regular students. Tom and I both get involved in teaching, so we're on the ground teaching with people. And one of the things my students might use is almost cat-sized treats.
Yeah.
So they're much more likely to use cat treats, or whether they prep meat or whether they prep something their dog absolutely loves or uses. But it's very, very small. And I remember being given not that long ago, we had a Great Dane here doing some training, and she gave me a couple of his kibble, and they were like the size of, I mean, they would have knocked Thistle out.
Like rocks.
They were like big rocks. It was like some sort of
Thistle.
it was some sort of breed specific kibble, and I swear it was humongous. It was like throwing a lump of, like, I don't know, horse poo size. It was big. It was really big.
Yeah.
And it was
Interesting comparison. It wasn't the one that came to mind. I was thinking like a rock, or maybe the size of a cell phone.
It was like a big nugget.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. But they gave it to me, and I was thinking about like how we use our food to play games, and I was thinking that how would I utilize that? I mean, it would be great because you would throw it, but that would be Thistle's daily. It might even be her weekly amount in one kibble.
And we have a few students who actually they like a certain kibble, or they like a certain type of food, and the food's quite big, so it makes for limited opportunity. So actually they just stick the daily food allowance into a bag on a morning, they get a rolling pin and they smash it up, and then actually becomes more pieces, right? So with this, it's a lot about the prep. The other thing is that often smaller dogs, because they don't need as many calories in terms of, their stomach's only so big so they can get full quite quickly. Often it's less about the food and it's more about the experience.
And I think that's something that Tom and I have really learnt to adjust over the years training different breeds. Actually, some of our dogs don't really like to work for food at all.
It's not about the taste.
What they love is the experience. So my dogs, even if they're full, they'll still play Magic Hand. You actually have to be quite aware of if they're full, because they'll still take food because it's the experience and the playing. And then suddenly you'll see them go, oh, I'm a bit full actually. And it's because the experience of playing Magic Hand is really joyful for them.
So with that, with your smaller dogs, what we'd be looking at is, well, how can you animate this food in such a way that that it gets them more engaged with it? And it's not about, just getting full. It's about having this experience with the food.
So when we say
together.
animation, we mean what, Tom? Like, I'm thinking bowling, I'm thinking catching, I'm thinking hide and seek, I'm thinking like games where we really use the food as part of it, bouncing
chasing
it
in your hand, all these different things that actually there'll always be one type of animation that really lights your dog up. And equally within that, for smaller dogs, it really helps if they also are rewarded by not just food but also play. So thinking about developing a animation with a toy, or even animation of yourself, whereby you're giving them attention, you're giving them affection, and you're animating your own body, and seeing how they find that rewarding. Because the fact is, you don't want to think when your daily food allowance is gone, at I don't know, midday, that, oh my God, I've got the rest of the day and I need to figure out how I can continue to reward my dog.
So it's being able to have those experiences with your dog as well. And we both think the power of play is really huge. One of our sayings for sure is those that play together stay together. And we think it's hugely invaluable to be able to play with your dog. And we're not just thinking tugging here. Tugging is probably one of the most limited of them. We're thinking, like we said, catching, a dog who'll want to interact and retrieve with you and push something back in your hands, or maybe it's a level of like a little bit of chase. There's so many games you can play. Definitely get involved in some play with your dog.
So that's the kind of first area where there's big differences. Now the next area where we see a difference is in the way that they move. So smaller dogs, they're often much quicker, much more fast twitch, like they're just much twitchier, whereas larger dogs, they're typically much slower and much more kind of ploddy. Now, there's a big question over whether this is something that's really hardwired into them genetically, or whether they're kind of a product of their circumstances. Because the fact is that smaller dogs have much more opportunity to move quickly, run around like
get
crazy.
in and out of things, get in and out and under and through, and they can kind of, like Thistle, for example, is always looking. Thistle, by the way, is our smallest. She's Tom's dog, and she's the smallest of our dogs. But she'd be like looking at holes and thinking about getting down them, whereas most of our dogs couldn't even get their nose in the holes that Thistle thinks about going in them.
Yeah, and she's, it doesn't take a lot for her to run because she doesn't need much space to run, whereas obviously your bigger dogs, especially if they're living in a smaller house, for example, they maybe can't get off the lead.
Let's say a Great Dane. I know that growing up, actually, I used to show Great Danes, beautiful Great Danes, when I was younger, and I lived in Plymouth growing up, and they were very calm, slow, sedate, trained house dogs, and these guys were in a small terraced house. They had 3 Great Danes, and some people would be like, oh my god, 3 of those, and they were fawn black mask Great Danes, and they were very, very laid back. They were very, very sedate. They didn't have any sort of struggles with living in a small space, and never would they have run or zoomed or And so it's crazy when you think about it, because they're such huge dogs, and yet completely what you're saying, Tom, that was their circumstance, that was their environment.
And so the fact is that our dogs become more of what they do day in, day out. So if your dog is a little bit kind of on the slower side, a little bit on the more thoughtful side, then actually if you just practice, moving quickly, practice them doing rather than thinking, over the course of a couple of weeks, if the balance is tipped, towards doing and movement, actually they're more like they'll move quicker. They're more likely to move quicker. One thing that we get all of our large breed dog owners to do very early on in working with us is we say, okay, let's just have them earning their dinner and let's just animate the food. So they're chasing the food, they're you're rolling the food, they're catching the food, they're doing. And after a couple of weeks, what the owners come back and say, and these are like game changer owners who like trust us through this process, they're like, God, he's animated, he's focused, he's engaged. Whereas before, I would have described him, and other people would have described him, as slow, stubborn, right? If everyone's heard a dog being called stubborn, these dogs that are a little bit larger and like this. And so often it's down to actually rehearsal, and whether it is a little bit of a genetic component, they're kind of hardwired that way or not, they don't have to stay that way, because they will become more of what they do day in, day out.
It's a funny thing. The only thing I would say, I have obviously working Cocker Spaniels, and then I have Border Collies. And I know that recently I've had a male Border Collie puppy, Tokyo, and it's so different having a male Border Collie to my whizzy little Spaniels, because he's so much more... He's not slow in it by any means, is he, Tom? Like in agility, you've seen him. How does he look when he does agility?
Fast.
Like really fast twitch. And yet, when you do like a little simple trick with him, you really have to train fast. Because if you don't train fast, I don't think he would do it without you changing your mechanics or your transitions. It's not like it's not as fast twitch. And yet he is fast twitch if you train him in fast twitch.
Yeah. And the even though he's not a giant breed by any stretch,
we're still talking a 13-kilo collie.
he's still now of that size where actually, if he's in a room of the house, if he's in the house, actually he can't run around or move quickly because he's a bigger dog. So he in essence is, if we don't do different things with him, he in essence is practicing just being more slow and thoughtful.
I mean, he could at best do a trot, and that would be about 2 or 3 paces.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we've got to think
Before
about when we think about when we think about gait, it would be walk mainly, trot a little, whereas something like Blink would be scamper, pounce, run.
Yeah.
That's all she knows, scamper, pounce, run.
And so they're creatures of efficiency, and so they're more likely to do what they do day in, day out. And obviously smaller dogs and bigger dogs, they do different things day in, day out by the nature of their size. So the cool thing is what we're saying is, yeah, you've seen a difference. If you own a giant breed, you know the difference well. If you own a small breed, you know the difference well. But the cool thing is that you can change that. And this is something that you can develop.
Shapeable, trainable, adaptable, and you can, like Tom said, develop it and change it and actually make it a trained behavior to move fast or to move slow, depending on actually what we're looking for.
Yeah. Now, next thing that we see as being one of the big differences, what we tried to do with this episode is we get asked this question a lot. So we tried to really boil it down as to what are like the three things that really make the difference. There isn't necessarily a difference relating to the dog themselves, but maybe how we work with that dog. And for sure, bigger dogs, we feel as though we have to protect the world from them a little bit more than your smaller dogs.
And for example, I'm training currently a German Shepherd dog. The German Shepherd dog would get away with way less than Thistle would. So what I'm saying is Thistle would get away with a lot more because she's little and cute.
Yeah.
So if Thistle went, I don't know, let's say chasing a skateboard, probably everyone would laugh.
Yeah.
Because it's like this tiny, how heavy is she? Maximum 2.5?
2.5, 3, yeah.
She's tiny, 2.5 kilos, versus the German Shepherd that I'm training, I would say is probably, I mean, it's a big male GSD. I'd probably say he's got to be in his 40s to 50s easily. If he goes chasing a skateboard, no one's laughing.
No.
Like no one's, so I completely see that in terms of the world.
And equally, you know, you've got your young, I don't know, St. Bernard, let's say, just go with a different breed. And yeah, they're getting on well with other dogs, but they then get to a certain size where actually you start to think he's maybe a little bit too rough for that other dog. And
he's there playing with, I don't know, a little whippet.
Yeah, and that other dog might be just a little bit too small to play with him. And so, in essence, we change our choices based on how big the thing on the other end of the lead is. And with that, what we find is that often bigger dogs, they have more rules imposed on them, which in turn makes them a little bit less engaged. And we're not saying you shouldn't have rules, but it's about how we work with the rules. And the fact is that obviously none of you, because you're all game changers, but the way that most people put rules on dogs is by nagging, intimidation, and possibly using some level of punishment and consequence to that. Game Changer World, we don't do that. We inspire great choices and we have rules, but actually we inspire great stuff. But one of the big things that we see is that actually bigger dogs have almost been nagged to the point where their human isn't sexier than the squirrel.
In fact, their human is just not sexy.
The human has lost all their sexiness because they've been a bit too strict.
And I think sometimes we've got to look at the rules that we have, big dog, small dog, all dogs, like we've got to consider those. Me thinking about like you with your guys, they really have, and the same for mine, there's really on the whole, we're pretty, yeah, we wouldn't have Thistle jumping and barging into one of our big dogs, let's say Illy, as much as we wouldn't have, I don't know, Bet trampling over Blink.
Yeah.
We don't have it either way, do we?
Yeah, and in fact, we don't have rules. We just have more expectations that are a result of our training. And I think that's a big mindset shift. Rules put the onus on the dog. Expectations as outcomes of our training puts the onus on us.
And that's what it's about. With those of you that listen to us on a regular basis, like Tom and I, you know that for us it's about the dogs learning, guided by games, by fun, by energy,
training
and actually
for the situation.
They have a great choice and a menu of choice, in fact, of all the things that can come to them as good stuff. Like we have got a lot of good stuff to deliver, and we take it as our job. Like that's our mission.
Yeah, I mean, we'll tell you a little story. It was a bit of a scary story that happened a few days ago, where we were out for a walk, and Thistle was there, and Bet was there, and Brave was there as well, and we're walking along, and we're playing in the water. And there's a wall next to the water, and of course we trust our dogs. We've trained for the situation. They have freedom, and then we saw little Thistle on a wall.
And it was at the moment as Tom had gone, Thistle whistle.
I was like, where's
which
Thistle? Let me call her.
It was his recall, and I was like, no. no, as she's like doing this like look over the cliff dive. And she wasn't stupid, right? Like, she was great.
And to be honest, the wall for any other dog would not be a high wall, but
It's
this
just
is this.
Thistle, who is like literally maybe 10 centimeters tall.
And I'd called her, and literally it kind of made us realise that you know what, we definitely trained for that situation. That was an optimist.
And the other thing was that we train and we work with all of our dogs in the same way, because we were out and I didn't really even think about the big wall, and neither did you, in the sense that we don't see that in our world, all dogs are kind of equal, right? Like, we didn't see Thistle as any less able to do anything. So we're out with them. And I mean, we're hiking and we're up on the moorland. The moorland's beautiful. If you ever get a chance to visit us in Devon, it's the most beautiful spot. Devon is amazing, whether you come to Super Trainer or anything else here. It's like one of those spots that's just amazing. It's so picturesque. And we were walking. It was so enjoyable. And there's literally, like I said, it was. We treat all of our dogs the same.
Doing a little bit of mountaineering.
There she was.
The cool thing is that she responded to a recall, which again is our expectation on our training outcomes, and she walked along the wall, down the steps, and then came and did a recall.
And she kind of did. It was really funny because she went all the way around the edge of it before she decided that how to get to us. So she was trying, and she was showing us that she was trying, but at the same time, she wasn't like, she was definitely she was really smart with it, wasn't she?
And so really we kind
great
of
training,
laughing
Tom.
at that.
Great training.
Laughing at that story, because actually we don't. If we switch from a world of rules to a world of, you know, expectations on our training, then all dogs, no matter their size, they can have freedom. And like, you know, Bet, for example, the Border Collie, sure, she's 13 kilos, but actually she has the presence of a 70 kilo dog in the environment.
We named her as a young dog the Bulldozer, and she's kind of stood by that name until recently, when she started to jump dogs now and avoid that. But she would, as a young dog, she would just run. She was like a little bulldozer. And I think it's completely true.
And so what we've got to do is put the expectation back on ourselves and think, how can we train for this situation, not in this situation? And what we've got to think is, whenever we all get a dog for a reason, there's always a reason why we got a dog. And sometimes that dream gets put on the back burner, and we've got to take it off the back burner and put it back kind of in reality. But the answer to the question of, are you sexier than a squirrel, isn't just a comedy question. That is the difference between you being able to have the confidence to give your dog freedom and not. And that's why this podcast has got a comedy name, but actually this is serious stuff. This is dogs and owners reaching their relationship potential or not, and living a life of restriction. And we don't want that for anyone. And that's exactly why we do this.
So I suppose my final tips for big dog, small dog would be, and this is seeing many, many owners in Devon, would be, actually, we should really, I like the idea that I don't go, this is a small dog, I'm going to do this, or this is a big dog, I'm going to do this. I kind of see what's in front of me and I train accordingly. We do have our dogs out together. They do work together. They are with us. And at the same time, if I see something in my small dog that I want in my big dog, I look at how I can adjust it. And when we're saying big dogs, like we said, we don't have... Illy's our most giant of the breeds, and she's still a smaller. She's a standard poodle.
Yeah. 22 kilos.
So she's not a huge dog, although mainly fluff.
She's mainly fluff. So guys, that's our take on small dogs, big dogs. That's from us training thousands of dogs all over the world. It's absolutely fluid. It's absolutely dynamic. The only thing that we wouldn't advise you change is their weight beyond what it should be. And on that note, we'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe, and remember, stay sexy. Hey, before you go, have you taken part in the worldwide Sexier Than a Squirrel Challenge?
It's a 25-day online video program, huge energy, amazing community, and over 6,000 people are already taking part.
The only question is, you know where you are today, where do you want to be 25 days from now? Head to absolutedogs.me/sexy.